have to be a bit more careful with my clap than usual. Hi there, I'm Andrew. Welcome to Adventure Rider. Today we're going to talk about the Alpinestars Tech-Air Off-Road jacket. This is an expensive bit of kit, and it's something that is, I would say in its segment, definitely the market leader. So it's attracted a lot of interest, but I think airbags, they're a little bit like 3D TVs. Every few years, the industry has a go at sort of making them happen and become mainstream. And in all honesty, they've never quite hit the spot for sort of mass market consumer use. They've always been a bit fussy. There's always been things that just detract from the reason people would want to use them en masse every day. But I feel like that could be changing with the latest selection of Alpinestars Tech-Air jackets. And this is my one here. This is the Tech-Air Off-Road. The elephant in the room is, why am I wearing this sling? Well, we'll come back to the full story later. It definitely relates to my use or lack of this product in Morocco. And that is also the reason you haven't seen any videos from me. I've been out the studio and obviously not on the bike for a bit. So I was one of about 15 UK riders in Morocco doing Sandraiders 2025 who had a Tech-Air off-road jacket. I'm gonna tackle it from the angle of, I have the feedback from 17 different crashes from British riders who are all of an intermediate to a semi-advanced level. And that is probably representative of most people out there. These are reviews from people who have contacted me through WhatsApp after a request on the Sandraiders group to give me their honest feedback. So these are people that have parted with their own money and they have their own completely unbiased opinions on whether they think they're good or bad as a product. And I will throw in my own experience as well. So the fundamental point about this, I think, in reviewing conclusion, is that in all the main areas of what this is attempting to do, this is an astonishingly good bit of kit. So in protecting you and delivering that key level of airbag protection, deployment, performance, ergonomics, this does the job so well. It does it all but perfectly, frankly. There were very, very few complaints. All of the negatives are small points that, frankly, given how good the fundamental points are, can be overlooked. But when you need this to work, and what it's designed to do is protect you in the event of a relatively serious accident. So it's not designed to deploy if you just drop your keys on the floor or if your bike just falls over at a standstill. It's designed to deploy when you need it to prevent injury. And it's got a very extensive deployment that goes all the way across the chest, around the sides, over the shoulders, particularly protecting around the neck and down the back. Now, to go into slightly more detail, this means one of the biggest criticisms for me about this product is the fact that it is extremely hot. There's no denying that. I think this was something that people thought might be a problem when it came out. You essentially have a passive armor system here that's very similar to the bionic vest you can get for a couple £100 from Alpinestars, but with the added airbag. The difference really is that all behind here and all across the back, you have a very large bladder that's deflated. And even though you've got this honeycomb airflow, which borrows of course from the bionic, it doesn't get through to you because of the bladder that's deflated underneath it. Being British, living in the UK and not being experienced in riding in too many 30+ degree situations, although that is exactly what we have today, it was something of a shock. And last year was my first real year off-road riding, and it was horrible and wet and cold pretty much all year. So it was definitely a shock, and I really feel the heat. I really overheat quickly. I'd gone out with base layer, this, and then MX jersey over the top, Krieger rucksack over that, 3 litres of water. You need as much as you can take because you will need more than 3 litres on a 10, 11 hour stage. And also tools, lunch, some spares, and so on. So all of that adds to a lot of weight. This is about 1.5 kilos heavier than the non-airbagged version with the canisters, the electronics, and the bladders included within it. 1.5 kilos is not a lot, and the overwhelming feedback from everybody was that at first, yes, it's noticeably a little bit heavier, but basically it's very, very well ergonomically styled, so it fits really nicely. You don't feel that weight particularly. It's more the airflow, I think, for me, that kind of really is noticeable. So that was the reason why on the first day I wore this. I was just really blown out. It was incredibly hot, hard work. We quickly went up to 2,000 meters. People were dropping their bikes in this river, left, right, and center, and I was there with a friend trying to help him whose bike had drowned, and we were there for a good hour. And whilst we were there, there's obviously an obligation to help other riders whose bikes were drowning, who dropped theirs under the river. So I had to go and fish about 20 bikes out. I was absolutely exhausted in the heat, up at altitude as well. So all those things meant that basically it got to the end of the day and I was foolish. I basically had another protector with me that was passive protection only. Decided to wear that, doing a sort of cost-benefit analysis, and of course that's the day that I have my accident. I came off on a sand dune, avoiding another rider who'd stopped on the top, who I couldn't particularly see, and I went left, and left was very much a vertical drop onto a very concrete-like surface. It was the start of a sand dune area, so I went over the bars, put my arms out, shoulder was dislocated, category 4, all the tendons ripped, rotated backwards, very painful, surgery, fly back to the UK, long recovery. So that's essentially my story. The obvious question is, had I not been an idiot and had I worn the Alpinestars, would I be okay? Well, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be worse. The rep himself, actually, for Alpinestars suggested that it probably wouldn't have made too much difference. A pronation injury where you put your arm out, it's not part of the airbag equation in that sense. I was going too slowly, really, for an airbag to kind of do its thing in full. If you're going quicker, you tend to sort of slide and roll along the road, and you don't have time to put your arms out. I had time to fall from about a 2.5 meter height, roughly, pretty much vertically downwards, and put my arms out with the extra weight of stuff on me. So that was the problem. So there's no guarantee this would have solved the problem. And it's one of the few areas perhaps that an airbag can't really solve. And there's not any passive armor that really would prevent something like that either. I will go through some of the other thoughts and opinions of the other riders because I think it's really interesting. So there are 13 riders, 17 deployments amongst them, some people with no deployments at all. And I want to just highlight some of these points. These are all genuine reviews, completely unedited feedback. So there's a nice little summary. I have Matt here. Matt says, I had a high speed off on day run onto the rocks. I'm convinced the airbag saved me from serious injury and I'll even wear it now on my road bikes. Best €1,000 ever spent. And to be honest, putting it on felt heavy, but I didn't notice once I was riding. Keep well, old boy. Shai says, hey, had one crash and one deployment around 50 kilometers an hour. My front wheel washed aside. It was the least painful crash I can remember. Related or not, I don't know. It was super easy to change the canister. Charging lasts nicely and overall super comfortable to wear. I wholeheartedly recommend. Here we have Leo, who had 3 deployments. First one was a big crash and I walked off. Second time was in the dunes and I'd rather it didn't go off, but at the same time, my mate fell over going the same speed and dislocated his shoulder. That could be Andy, who ended up sharing the taxi ride back to the airport with me and having an almost identical surgery in France. Third time was somewhere in the middle, probably would have been fine without, but didn't resent it. Also saw Derek have his massive crash where his axle snapped and I cannot believe he walked away out of that. My mate Harry also had a 40 kilometers an hour off and was undamaged on the upper body. He says the product feels a bit like a V1. The packaging is super massive and inefficient. The wiring is seriously janky. I would wait as long as possible before buying one. If you're thinking about Sandraiders 25, I would wait until you're sure they will not produce a V2 in time. Now, I think that's a fair final point. It's good to obviously balance negatives and positives here. It is more bulky. The hump on the back, as it sticks out, is definitely noticeable. So this is where the canisters are. You look like you have a little bit of a hunchback. If you've watched the Dakar, you will probably notice that when you look at the riders, they do look a little bit funny. So it sticks out a little bit here. There's this elasticated bit. You can fit a hydration bladder in there if you wanted. So you don't need a separate backpack. That's quite a clever little system with some loops to plumb it through. But this is where the canisters and that little system lies. So that's why it sort of sticks out there. And inside it, it does look a bit like a bomb vest that was sort of assembled at home. It's got exposed wires. I can see why, say, it looked like a V1, but that said, nobody's had any issues with the kind of quality of performance. It doesn't seem to impede it in any way. So perhaps they could be a bit more space efficient. There is no V2 on the horizon, certainly for next year. And I think given this only came out last year, probably not for quite a while. I'd like to have it slightly more ergonomic in an ideal world. And whereas the Tech 5 is coming out in a plasma version, which fits into the plasma back protector very neatly, that only has one canister. This has 2, so there are 2 deployments. And this is the huge thing about this. There are people, as I've already said from only a couple of reviews, having multiple deployments. And you will want more than one for the kind of thing that this is designed to go with. You could use a Tech-Air 5, which is what Adam Ryman uses. That doesn't have passive armor protection, and you can team up with anything, but it's single-use deployment. So it sort of depends. If you're doing multi-day rallies, then you want as much protection as possible. I think it's a fair trade-off to provide that multi-deployment within a day system. It has this little lump at the back. I don't think it's too much of a detraction. So as for waiting for a V2, if you're doing something like Sandraiders or a rally or what have you, and you're considering this, I would disagree. I would say don't wait for a V2 because you either need this protection now or you don't. And if you need the protection now, it's absolutely sufficiently good enough. There's always going to be evolutions in the future, but I don't think that's imminent. Philip B says, I had 4 deployments of my air jacket. It was my first Sandraiders and I finished uninjured, so I will be using it again. Can't say if it saved me, but at least one time I think it did. And this is sort of the point. You don't know until you didn't wear it and you had an accident. And all the people whose events were ended early that I know of were not wearing air vests. And I am not aware of anybody that did wear an air vest that ended up having an injury that prevented them finishing. So I'm not saying that, you know, it makes you immortal, but I am just saying that at this kind of level we were at, this seemed to be the case for the sample that we had. Steedo sent a really long review, so I'm just going to skip to the end bit because that's very poignant. This is a well-developed quality product that's going to look after you. I found the battery life to be good. I think it's 30 hours, it says. And the canister's easy to change after the first attempt. Read the instructions, it's a no-brainer. Only real negative is the cost of new canisters, £100 a piece. However, if you compare that to the potentially disastrous costs of breaking or dislocating bones, it can be viewed as a bargain. I've got some footage of the bag deploying, which I think I will be able to overlay now. Need slowing down. So, as you can see, sort of very happy with the deployment there. The canisters at £100, like, yeah, that is expensive, and yeah, you'd sort of hope that they would almost sort of subsidise them a bit to get people into the product. So hopefully we'll see those prices come down, and you have to buy that canister. There's no choice. So they kind of got you there, but would I take £100 right now to not be missing the best riding season weather-wise for many years, and, you know, having to cancel lots of events I had planned and so on and so forth, and ending an event I'd spent thousands on early? Obviously, like, it's a no-brainer. So this is Derek, who had this very high-speed crash where his axle snapped on his wheel. I mean, I've never heard of that, and, you know, what an awful thing to happen. So I had no false deployments. My vest saved me from any major upper body injuries. When my front axle snapped at speed on day 6, I went headfirst into a ditch of rocks and came out with bruises on my hands only. I have another buddy who came off in 4th gear, injuries basically everywhere there wasn't a vest. Very, very interesting to hear that. Nico says, it was great to meet you out there. Sorry, your ride was cut short. So I was a fan by the end, but was not at the beginning. This is really interesting because, again, this would be the category I fall into. I found activating the system, replacing the canisters after they pop, really irritating to begin with until I figured it out. It's not too intuitive, blah, 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 blah. For example, when you accidentally turn the vest off by holding down the button on the front, so that's this thing here. And this is a good point, this is something I was going to mention myself. So you can turn it off right now, which I will do. So you hold it for about 5 seconds and it will turn off. So now, there you go, long buzz. So now you've just got passive protection. There's a switch inside the back, which is a shipping mode, and that's how you turn the entire thing on and off. And you need to kind of be in there turning that on and off fairly regularly, because if you store this in a point where, you know, you'd imagine you want to store it looking like this. So if you overlay the front with the receiver part on the zip, it will automatically arm itself if you haven't sort of deactivated it into shipping mode at the back. It's very easy to do that. You pop out the cover and you flick a switch, but it's just something to mention. Now, if you want to turn it back on again, you're wearing this and you've got your jacket or you've got your motocross jersey on, you've got your backpack. So you've turned it off because you're walking around, you're at lunch, you don't want to drain the battery, etc. Now you want to turn it back on. Just hold it, right? That would be the intuitive thing. But no, you have to, I think got one arm, you have to take it off and kind of do that, unzip the whole thing, detach it so it sort of deactivates or whatever, and then do it back up. And obviously you can only do that if you take all your other layers off, which is very annoying. And there we go, it's armed itself. So yeah, that's silly, that's annoying, that's stupid, I don't understand it. Presumably that could be changed quite easily by the designers. But anyway, so that's annoying. But again, like, are you gonna not buy it and not use it because of that little point? Not for me. So yeah, this is still Nico. When you put it on, it feels heavy, but not cumbersome. It's been well ergonomically designed, especially when you load it with a further 2 kilos of water in the camelback pouch on the back. When you're standing around in the sun, it can get quite hot too. However, on the ride, the venting is actually really good, and after a while, you barely notice it's there. So, different opinions here. As I said, I didn't think the venting is brilliant because this whole section at the front is essentially prevented from venting. So, yeah, not everyone's going to suffer in the heat in the same way. So, again, you need to kind of slightly gauge what kind of a rider you are, how you find things, where you're going to do the majority of your riding. But there's no doubt for me, next year, when I'm in Morocco, because I've already signed up again, I will absolutely be using this, and I will take greater steps to try and mitigate this problem, which is possible. I will potentially only wear this on its own on the outside. This is something I haven't fully thought through, but this has abrasion resistance in the shoulders and elbows, which you don't get on many of the other passive protection, which means it actually could be suitable to just wear on its own as an outer layer with a base layer. And that's what one of the French riders was doing. Now, whether the airbag would suffer if it deployed and you were sliding along on the road, I think it would. It would still deploy, but I think you could damage it more easily and therefore have to get the thing replaced and sent off to Alpinestars. So I'm not saying it's advisable. I will look for the thinnest base layer, the thinnest MX jersey for sure, but I will remove the backpack equation. So I will not be wearing my backpack. I will put my stuff on the bike. This will definitely help with airflow. I also had trail pockets at the front, preventing airflow even more. So I will work with this and work around it as much as I possibly can, rather than not wear it, which obviously ended up badly for me. Harry B says, I had a reasonably high speed crash on day 2, which involved being launched a fair distance over the bars onto rock-strewn, hard-packed sand. Primary impact was on the spot just above my hip, too low for the body armour, too high for the plates of my trousers. This caused a muscular haematoma and it's still sore to walk as we speak. Secondary impacts were to my right shoulder and ribs, both of which were protected by the traditional armour plates and the inflated bladder of the Tech-Air, which from memory deployed whilst I was in the air. I had pain in both of these spots but nothing broken, and have to assume there would have been more damage in those areas were it not for the air vest. Well, I think that's a pretty safe assumption given what happened where there wasn't any protection. I did not strike my head or experience any significant neck strain. It's hard to say what role the air vest played here, but I certainly felt the bladder inflate, limiting my head movement as I lay on the ground, taking stock of the damage. This is really important to note. It provides a fantastic cushion, I am led to believe from all these reviews, with the neck support. Now, you've got the option, passive protection, you can go for a neck brace. Neck braces are designed to prevent your neck and your spine having injury, but a lot of the force gets transferred through to your collarbone. It's considered a sacrificial limb, bone in that sense, and so you're sort of more likely to end up with a broken collarbone. I would rather not have a broken something, so I think that the air vest way of solving that is better. I'm not an expert, but this is my logic and my reasoning, and I would rather have that than a neck brace. So, in conclusion, while it wasn't quite the perfect crash for the air vest to protect me from all its effects, it did everything it was supposed to do, and the outcome could only have been worse if I was wearing just traditional armour. I just can't say how much worse. As my opinion of it while not being in the process of crashing, I must say its weight being concentrated high on my back was not the distraction I worried it might be. I also found it more breathable than I feared. It's certainly not as light and breezy as my Alpinestars Bionic Tech V2, which is essentially the completely passive version of this you can get, as I mentioned, for a couple £100. But having had that fairly big crash, the lightness and comfort of that armour now makes it feel flimsy and inadequate. That's interesting. I don't know that it necessarily would feel flimsy, the Bionic. It's actually probably got slightly more extensive coverage in some of these side areas, but it is marginal. But you know, this is no doubt a very robust and well-formed piece of kit. You don't feel like you're lacking anywhere, especially knowing obviously you've got that airbag to back you up. James, the vest felt a bit cumbersome at first, but it carries the weight well. I soon forgot it was there. As the week progressed, I heard how it protected others when they fell, and I became sure it was a better choice than upgrading my passive armour and wearing a neck brace. The technology is really clever, but apart from memory to charge it each night, doesn't feel like a hassle. I wouldn't ride without it now. So, in conclusion, from those riders, as I said, I think the pros are really the main event, the main issues at hand. Insanely good algorithm. It works brilliantly. There are 3 riding modes. You've got Rally, Enduro, and Street. Street, from what I can tell, the main difference is that you have protection from if you get rear-ended, sat on your bike by a car, it will deploy. That's not part of the equation during the Enduro and Rally. There's a lot of confusion about the difference between those two. I have tried to dig into it and I can't honestly tell you what really the difference is. If you imagine Enduro, it's sort of stop-start, lower speed crashes potentially. Rally in its pure form is obviously a very high speed pursuit, but you still have jumps in both. So people had them in different modes, and there was some discussion here. I didn't go into every detail of everything everyone said about maybe they had it in the wrong mode and stuff. I think they could probably just merge these two into one, because all the parameters that they disclose in the instructions seem to have the same sort of bits to them when it comes to those two modes. So it could just be a way of jazzing it up and making you feel like you've got 3 modes rather than 2 like you get in the Tech-Air 5, perhaps. Maybe it's a marketing thing. So it'd be great if anyone knows more than me on that. So please put that in the comments, or if anyone from Alpinestars is watching, please just clarify specifically what the difference is between those 2 modes. Not speculatively, specifically what the difference is in application. Because if you're doing Sandraiders, it's a rally, but you're an everyman, you're not riding it at competitive speeds. So your average speed is going to be, like 30, 40 kilometers an hour with all the technical terrain. So in that sense, it's an extended trail ride. So which of the 2 that comes in remains to be seen. The fit and the quality of the armour, there's no doubt, it's Alpinestars. They have so much experience in this area. It's brilliant. It's very, very nice to wear. As I said, it's heavier, but it's not that noticeable. The hump on the back, slightly annoying, but you can certainly live with it. The simplicity of use is really, really straightforward. So as mentioned, you simply plug in the USB-C here. It will charge. Everything else, apart from the finicky thing about turning it back on after it's been turned off manually, is really, really well thought through. The abrasion resistance adds a nice element to it, which you don't generally get with a lot of things, and also prevents you, obviously, from having to change this. If you were to come off and you were to tear through the elbows, that would be really annoying because everything else is integrated. So you'd end up having to buy a whole new piece for it. So the fact they've reinforced that, I think, is good. You can change the canisters yourself. So there was somebody in the messages here saying that once they'd reached 3 deployments, it was basically flashing, telling them they needed to send it back. Now, that is the case, but it also will still work up to a 4th deployment. And then I think it will not work any more than that, but it's simply advising you to get it inspected. It will still work. And worst case, you have passive armor that you can use just like any other passive armor. So those are all the positives, and I would say they are the main things. So the cons are going to be the electronics, the weight, heat, and airflow. We've mentioned about turning it back on. You need to wear a base layer with it. So Climb have like the Tactical Pro, which is a very, very lightweight compared to this passive armor, but it's designed with a fabric that is designed to be worn straight against your skin. That makes such a big difference because even adding this super light zero fit, I can't remember what it's called. It's the super thin. We've just launched it on Urban Rider, but it's the Hot Weather Zero Fit base layer, which is as lightweight and thin as any base layer I've ever worn. Even wearing that with it, you'd still rather not. You're still adding another layer. You're still adding, therefore, insulation. So yeah, you're going to have 3 layers on in all likelihood in total. But I would sort of be quite keen on it being the case that you could just wear it on its own directly against your skin. Does everything have to be black? It's always the way. Black absorbs heat. It probably hides the dirt. And that leads me on to another point, is that I can't see a way that you can actually detach the sort of air vest system from it so you can wash this thing. And if you've used it for an entire week at Sandraiders or more than that, no doubt it's going to start to smell a bit. And most other armor systems, you have the ability to wash them in some capacity. So this would be like a hand wash and a bit of a faff therefore to do. And you need to be very careful not to get the electronics wet. So that's something. Luckily, mine didn't smell too bad because I did come off only a few days in. Yeah, you generally will need to size up your riding gear. You have been told you need a golf ball sized expansion point around it. So that's not that huge, but if you have quite form-fitting, unstretchy, outer shells or whatever to go with it, then that needs to be considered because you do not want to have it go off against something where there's no room for expansion because it will go onto you and that will be uncomfortable. Similarly with backpacks, you're told to sort of loosen them a little bit. So I did that and it ended up being quite loose, especially with all the weight of the water and all the tools and all that kind of stuff in the back. And if you are really off-roading, it's going to jangle about a bit. It's not as nice as having it ergonomically fitted. So I would move therefore to perhaps removing a backpack from the equation if you're able to do so with whatever you're doing. So yeah, that is it. Real world, I was actually really surprised by the overall positivity because I had found it heavy. I had found it hot. My personal view was that I now wouldn't do anything serious without it. So it really has impressed me just how good it does what it's supposed to do. The deployments, the algorithm, they are worth the money in my humble opinion. So hopefully it's been useful hearing from all of these people because there's nobody that has one that basically had anything hypercritical to say about it. Lots of people are saying they would never look back, and I think it is reaching that point. There's enough people with that sort of an opinion, with an honest opinion, of the product, that I think we'll start to see it more and more with road riding and beyond in the off-road as well. So if you have any particular questions, there's a million different things you could discuss about this. It's been quite a long review, so I do apologise, but also I think there's a lot of points to cover, and I did want to just explain a little bit from every single person, because each one of their opinions is just as valid as my own. But it seems like there is a general consensus that Alpinestars have done a great thing here. So anyone considering it, you're probably right that you should have one. And I don't think it's going to convince massive detractors of airbags. But, you know, I would probably put myself in that camp. I was only buying one initially because we were told we had to. I thought, don't really like it, the prospect of it, but, you know, here we are, here I am, and I would definitely sort of champion it going forward. So these are available on Adventure Rider, they are available on MX Rider as well, and there are going to be some new additions to the lineup for next year in the Tech-Air collection, but the off-road remains as it is, and I think it's absolutely brilliant exactly as it is. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more video reviews in the adventure world. It won't be too long before I'm back on a bike, hopefully, and I'll be able to do some more interesting stuff out of the studio. Thank you for watching. See you soon. Goodbye.